Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. My name is Vaishali, and having learned quite a few things from, through, and from within human interactions, and having pursued and completed my master's in business administration and in clinical psychology, I today wish to talk about how confusion might at times lead to clarity. And conjoining with that thought, I'd like to take yet another thought, which is that freedom with regards to gaining that clarity can only happen if we walk through that confusion. And so all of that might sound a little confusing, which reminds me of a quote by Carl Jung, that if your path is absolutely clear, the path that you're walking on is absolutely clear, then maybe it's the path that has been carved out for you by somebody else. Then maybe it's somebody else's path that you're walking on. And since I've paraphrased this quote, in order to unwind it a little, I'll share the exact words or the exact quote as said by Carl Jung, which looks and reads something like this. So now let's think about it. Freedom actually entails us having choices. Now, way too many choices can actually create a lot more confusion, which is what psychologists and philosophers also call as the paradox of choices, the paradox of freedom. Because quite naturally, if you do not have choices, you're quite literally confined, and anything that is confined is not free. So we need choices. How many is for us to decide. But we need choices in order to experience any kind of a freedom. And choices invariably create confusion. And it is only when we resolve the confusion by making informed choices, by making informed decisions, that we come to some kind of clarity. Now, let's also be a little mindful over here to realize that that clarity might never be an absolute clarity. But for a moment in time, at that point in time, or maybe for another 2 years to 3 years to 5 years to 10 years, it might be clarity for that point in time, for that period of time, after which life will present us with situations, with people, with circumstances, with relationships, wherein once again we'll need to look at the choices made available to us, the choices in front of us, to then freely and responsibly choose in an informed way, to then come to some kind of clarity all over again, which should help us understand that it's not a one-time done thing, that it's a forever going on process that keeps evolving as we evolve, that keeps transforming as we transform with the information, the knowledge that we have, and hopefully which we've been able to convert into some kind of wisdom, to then make slightly more wiser choices. So, in order to connect all of these thoughts, wherein freedom equals choices, or without choices there exists no freedom, but rather becomes conformity, would also then tell us that with freedom or choices comes in a tad bit or a lot of confusion, the paradox of choices, which at times can feel overwhelming, but when that confusion is presented before us, or when we begin to feel confused because of the array of choices before us, we need to actually stop. We need to actually pause, to be able to note down all of the choices presented before us, to then even slow down a little further, so as to be able to reflect on all of the choices, to then come to one decision wherein we can actually say that we've made an informed choice. As of now, given the number of choices that have been put before me, that have been presented before me. And thereby, when I make that informed choice, I am taking full responsibility and accountability for the freedom that comes with the array of choices. So let's look at all of the words that interconnect, that overlap with regards to what I've just shared. So now, in order to elaborate this, in order to express this a little differently, present this a little differently, I have assembled a few things. And the idea is to visualize that there are so many people sitting besides us, that there are so many people in front of us, besides us, behind us, in front of us, and everyone's got to select one single item for themselves that they can take with themselves. What is that one thing that you will choose? What is that one thing that you will decide onto? Now, of course, somebody can say that there's a constraint over here, that I can only pick up one thing. And yes, that is where clarity comes from. Or maybe even if we had the choice to pick up five things out of the so many things, you still, or rather we still, would need some kind of a clarity to be able to make that choice and that decision for ourselves. So if you actually realize, if we objectively look at this experiment, now out of these options that have been placed before you, if you were asked to pick up just one thing, to decide and make a choice with regards to just one thing, what is that one choice you'd make? What will be those deciding factors that will help you make that informed choice? It clearly tells us that we are actually free to choose from so many things in the world, to choose from so many options in the world. It also tells us that we are forever making choices, from the littlest to the biggest of things, and many a times we are making those choices based on our past experiences, which is information stored in our memory banks, which is where our subconscious is making choices for us, which is where those choices are happening on an automatic basis based on our preconditioned information and preconditioned memory. But very rarely are we making wise, informed choices. In fact, as science tells us today, that 97 to 98% of our choices, the smallest to the biggest choices that we are making, is already present inside of us from the past informations, from the past memory that is stored in our memory bank. So many of the choices that we make in life are happening out of our preconditioned memory, information that has predated our present reality. And since it is happening in an automatic way, it is also quite naturally happening in a very rushed way, which is where science also tells us that our subconscious is far stronger, is far faster than our conscious mind, wherein it is making decisions in split seconds. And to some extent, it is definitely helpful. And yet, at the same time, if it is happening at that faster speed, if it is happening in such a rushed way, it's quite not naturally happening in a very mindful way, and thereby not happening in a wise, responsible way, which to some degree is definitely helpful, which is why it's there for a reason. And yet, on the other hand, on the flip side of the coin, if it is happening in such a fast way, in such a rushed way, quite naturally, it's not happening in a very mindful way. Quite naturally, it then is not happening in a very wise way. And if it's not happening in a very wise way, it's quite not possible for us to act in responsible ways. Because freedom only comes with choices, and the ability to choose wisely is acting responsibly. Which is why it's also said that freedom without responsibility, or rather, today I'd say, wise responsibility or responsibility with wisdom, is nothing but abuse, is nothing but irresponsibility. This experiment would also help us realize that out of the so many choices that are presented before us, that we get to choose from, at least for bigger choices in life, it's far wiser to slow down. It's far wiser to gather information about all of the choices presented before us, or at least list down the parameters of our choices, or have pictures with regards to what our choices look like and feel like to us, so that we are not only just gathering information, but we are also mindfully processing it. We are mindfully filtering out to come to a point wherein we can then choose that one thing or those five things that would actually hold some kind of meaning for us, that would actually hold some kind of value for us, that would add even some kind of a meaning to our experiences, value to our experiences, so that they then become mindful, meaningful, and priceless experiences. That, of course, naturally comes with choices that are more mindful. For everything that we choose or decide not to choose or filter out is primarily to have certain kind of an experience from it, and thereby being a little more mindful to reflect on the kind of experience that we would like to experience also needs some intentionality. So let's actually realize that none of us can come to any kind of a clarity if we've never faced any kind of confusion, because every confusion comes with choices, paradox of choices, and choices entail freedom, and freedom cannot exist without wisdom and responsibility, because anything that doesn't work like that is misuse and is abuse, is making ill-informed choices. And thereby, quite naturally, when it's an ill-informed choice, freedom cannot feel well informed. It will feel ill informed as well. It will feel malfunctioning as well. So let's actually slow down a bit to kind of gather all of the information, or at least the best amount of information that we can with regards to the choices that we have, so that we can process it, taking our own time to be able to come to some kind of clarity. So let's reflect on all of those aspects. Let's even take the time to reflect on the quote by Carl Jung, that if your path is absolutely clear, then you're probably walking on somebody else's path. In a way, then you're probably living somebody else's prescribed life. So let's not get afraid of confusions, but let's shift the lens and let's be a little thankful that confusion tells me that I have choices. That choices tell me that I'm free, free to even gather information to then make informed choices in a more responsible, in a more mindful, in a more resourceful manner, which will feel more meaningful and which will feel more valuable to me on a very personal level. Let's try and reflect on that, and I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And guys, if you do like the contextual content of these videos, please do like, share, and subscribe.